We're getting near the end of the year, guys, and although 2022 has been a tricky year for Apple in certain regards, I know exactly what I want from Tim & Co in 2023. Despite my fairly incessant whinging about Apple products this year, including the iPad Pro and the 10th generation iPad, and more recently the M2 MacBook Air, I am really looking forward to what Apple might give us in 2023. So with the new year approaching, and presumably you being a little bit fed up with your family by now, I thought we could just sit down, and it will be a bit rambly, I admit, but just sit down and have a think about what we should see from Apple in 2023. And for me, there's 7 things I'm looking forward to. So the first thing on my list is the Apple VR headset. Firstly, hands up, I haven't used VR for years and years. I tried it many years ago, but since then I've not put a modern VR headset on my head. And my podcast co-host Rob does regularly tell me that I need to get in on it, and I agree, I will do that next year. But I don't know, it just still feels very Tron-like, very, it's forced. You have to wear this great big thing on your face. It still, for me, doesn't feel mainstream. My mum doesn't use VR. I can't imagine her ever wanting to use VR. So the idea of Apple getting into this space as early as next year feels a bit weird. But that is why I'm looking forward to it, because I run this business, I talk about Apple, I make these videos, and to be honest, when they do stuff which is a bit odd and I suppose could be seen potentially as revolutionary if they get it right, then it gives me more to talk about. And Apple being Apple, the expectation is for them to come into this market and, as I say, revolutionize it or do something that no one else has thought of. Now, obviously, one of the key things with this will be how expensive it is, and there are reports of this thing being about $3,000, which puts it in the, well, again, I don't know what bracket that puts it into, but it certainly puts it into the, people with lots of disposable income and, I suppose, businesses, education potentially. It's just, again, it's such a strange product, such an odd niche for Apple to be getting into this early. But having said that, the rumours are pretty strong, and I do think we're going to see something next year with VR from Apple. And I guess if you think about it, all the stuff they've been doing with augmented reality on the iPhone, that's been leading to something. And if this reality OS, as it's being termed, is a thing, and we're going to see it quite soon, I can't wait to see what they're doing. Number 2 on my list is the next Mac Pro, and we've just pretty much gone past Apple's self-imposed 2-year deadline to transfer all of their Macs to Apple Silicon. That should have happened by November, really. There have been some reports recently from the rumour mill, and specifically Mark Gurman, which suggest that Apple are encountering a few challenges, shall we say, with the Mac Pro, and it's kind of understandable because they made that Mac Studio so powerful. If you spec up a Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra chip and everything you can throw at it, it's an incredibly, stupidly powerful Mac. And apparently the original idea for the new Mac Pro, the Apple Silicon-based one, was to fuse together, I think, 4 M1 Ultra chips to create this kind of M1 Extreme, and that would have 128 cores of graphics, 40 cores CPU. And the problem with that is that the user base for that is incredibly small. And apparently, according to Gurman, the amount of manufacturing time and the resources and the cost involved in making those chips could take away invaluable resources from higher volume machines. So why on earth would Apple make this very niche Mac Pro and take away resources from, let's say, MacBook Pros, the Mac Mini? So basically, we'll get a machine which looks pretty much identical to the current Intel version, but with some kind of super-powered M2 chip in there. But it probably won't have that lofty spec and performance that we've been hearing about on the grapevine. Being completely selfish about this and being someone who covers Apple and takes a great interest in what they do and how they do it, I just can't wait to watch from the sidelines and comment. Number 3 on my list is the next generation 14-inch MacBook Pro, and I should just say that I'm not looking forward to that because of the next generation M2 Pro and M2 Max chips. It'll be interesting what they do, but the reports suggest that they're going to be a marginal update over the M1 versions. It's got nothing to do with that at all. It's basically because the 16-inch MacBook Pro is rapidly getting way too big for me. And I have talked about this before, which I'll link to above, but in summary, I am doing more traveling now, and actually, even when I'm not doing traveling, if I'm just walking from my house to the studio, which is a mile down the road, not very far, that thing is just too heavy in my backpack. And it isn't just that. If you're traveling and you're working in coffee shops or on planes with small trays in front of you, I don't get to travel in business class. That laptop, the 16-inch MacBook Pro, is just too big. Don't get me wrong, the screen is wonderful. It's an incredibly powerful laptop, the most powerful laptop I've ever owned and used in my life. It's just too cumbersome. So I think I've made the decision in whenever it happens next year, which will probably be March, we think, to basically swap the 16-inch MacBook Pro for probably a lesser spec 14-inch MacBook Pro. Next up, we have a channel favourite, the AirPods Max. If you've watched any of my videos about these headphones, you'll know that I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with them. I love the design, I love the build quality. The sound isn't bad, although as I found out recently, it's not quite on a par with brands that really know what they're doing with sound. But they are flawed. Big time. And there's just some very strange decisions that Apple has made with these headphones that you can't look past. The first one is Lightning. They still use Lightning, which every other pair of headphones in this studio that I have are charged via USB-C, and more importantly than that, these don't have an off button, and that means you're always having to charge them. No matter how much of a low power state they go into in that stupid case that you put them into, they just run out of battery all the time, and they're just too expensive. I know you can get them cheaper than £549 these days, but that is still their retail price. If you buy these directly from Apple, that is what you pay, and that price is so far north of the competition, it's unbelievable. I want to see a new version of these next year, and I'd love to see all of those things addressed and fixed. I'd love to see some kind of wireless, high fidelity, lossless audio transmission, which we are being teased with on the rumour mill. There is the suggestion that Apple is working on some kind of codec that will allow lossless music to be transferred wirelessly to these. So I think Apple has a fantastic opportunity here to firstly lower the price of these, add those missing features in, USB-C charging, a proper case, an off button. Do that and we suddenly have a very compelling product. The problem is that I think if we are going to see a second generation AirPods Max, we're only going to see them in 2023. If it doesn't happen next year, it ain't happening. Number 5 on my list is the iPad mini. Let me take it out of this case so it's more relevant. The iPad mini is my favourite ever iPad, but it isn't perfect, and as I mentioned on a recent video, which I'll link to above, there are 3 things mainly that I want from the next version. The first thing is ProMotion. The display on this is great. The jelly scrolling thing doesn't matter, ignore that. But it does feel a bit sluggish at times because it doesn't have ProMotion. The second thing is another lens. You only get the standard zoom lens on the iPad mini, and because this is quite a good alternative to an iPhone when you're out and about, it would just be nice to have either the telephoto or the ultra wide. I think if one of those lens options, preferably the zoom lens I think, was available on the iPad mini, I'd use it more for photography. And the third thing, bear with me on this, is a Magic Keyboard. And that might sound crazy, but if it didn't have a trackpad and all you used it for was perhaps, email, general admin, a bit of blogging, it would be such a cool little device. So, new iPad mini next year, please, Apple, and just add those things in. And if you can, Face ID as well. Number 6, the next generation iPhone SE. I quite like this iPhone SE from 2022. The biggest problem with it, well, there's 2 problems with it. The first one is the price. In the UK, this costs £449. That's too expensive, I'm afraid. When you compare it against the competition, loads of other brands, including Xiaomi, Samsung, etc., sell proper budget phones for much less than this. Despite that, you do get a lot for your money because you get a flagship performing phone in, that's the other problem, a very old body. So this has the great big bezels around the screen and it has the Touch ID button. Basically, I'm trying to be nice about it and it's a bit of a stretch. The iPhone SE in 2023 really needs to up its game. And what I'd love to see, I know other people would love it as well because I've seen the comments, is for the iPhone mini form factor to become the next iPhone SE. Unfortunately, it sounds like the iPhone XR is going to be the next iPhone SE. So we're not going to see the mini form factor in this phone. We'll forgive Apple that. I just hope that whatever they do with the next SE, that they make it cheaper for starters, and that they also continue their trend of including the latest or nearly the latest chip inside. And equally, like the 9th generation iPad, which is priced correctly, it would be a fantastic entry point into iOS. The last thing on my list is, well, I don't know what it is, because Apple does have occasionally, not so much these days, but certainly in the past, they have had a tendency to really surprise us. And although the one more thing era has pretty much been left behind now, they do, like I say, occasionally come out with a product, a service, a feature, something that is completely unexpected, yet totally obvious. And they might just do that in 2023. So I'm going to sign off now and ask you one question, which is, what do you think Apple could surprise us with in 2023? Let me know in the comments. And if you've still got some time and you still want to avoid the family and all that leftover turkey, keep watching for a link to a video I made recently, which I'm incredibly proud of, which is a full review of the 2022 Porsche Taycan. That's right, I reviewed a car.